Hello, welcome to The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up within the hour. China announces 84% tariff on U.S. imports after Trump's imposition of a 104% tariff on Chinese goods entering the U.S. Death toll from the nightclub collapse in the Dominican Republic rises as more than 150 people are injured. Plus, Rwandan President Paul Kagame commemorates the 31st anniversary of the 1994 genocide. Let's begin The World Today. Be cool, says U.S. President Donald Trump. Everything is going to work out well. The U.S. will be bigger and better than ever before. That's his assurance to the American people hours after China announced 84% tariff on U.S. imports taking effect on Thursday, following Donald Trump's 104% tariff on Chinese goods entering into the United States. The Chinese tariff is an increase from 34% it already imposed on American imports. From tomorrow, China is adding 12 American companies to an export control list, a catalog of items and products that may require an export license to leave a country. They're also adding 6 American companies to the unreliable entity list, including AI companies. China has already filed a complaint to the World Trade Organization, where it says the U.S. is violating international trade laws. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, reacting to the announcement, has warned U.S. partners that pursuing a stronger alliance with China would have dire consequences. He said it was unfortunate that China decided to impose the tariffs, saying China does not have the edge here. Meanwhile, President Trump has been mocking tariff-hit nations, stating that they're ready to do anything while trying to negotiate with him. Trump was speaking at the National Republican Congressional Committee. He said he was a better negotiator than Congress, telling the audience, "I'm telling you, these countries are calling us up. They're dying to make a deal. Please, sir, make a deal. I'll do anything. I'll do anything, sir," according to Trump. He added that although some rebel Republicans argue that he must allow Congress to make a deal, he believes that if that were the case, China would not have been slapped with 104% tariffs and vice versa. Now, after several weeks of consultations between member states, EU Commission and industries, the EU has today adopted retaliatory measures against the US tariffs on EU steel and aluminum. EU member states approved today 25% tariffs on a wide range of US products, including almonds, orange juice, poultry, soya beans, steel, aluminum, tobacco, and yachts, in retaliation against 25% tariffs imposed by the US on imports of steel and aluminum from the bloc. These are Europe's first retaliatory measures in the trade war against US President Donald Trump against his trading partners across the globe. The list of products previously seen by the news media was the subject of intense lobbying by member states wary of US countermeasures hitting their industries. Hungary made it clear it was not voting in favor. France, Ireland, and Italy secured the removal of bourbon whiskey from the list of targeted products after Trump threatened its inclusion would trigger counter-imposition of a 200% tariff on European alcohol. The final list of US products hit by the EU retaliation is yet to be made public. And from British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, the world needs to start acting differently in the wake of President Trump's tariffs, and either a deal with the US or changing the rates of tariffs against the US will not be enough. He says the UK is negotiating with the US in hopes to improve the situation.
I think what's happened in the last few days, last week or so, is obviously very challenging for us and very challenging around the world. And I'm very disappointed to see tariffs in place. I don't think that they are good for our economy or for economies around the world. My instinct is that we shouldn't jump in with both feet to retaliate. So in that sense, I'm not changing my plans. I think calm, collected response. Obviously, we have to keep our options on the table and do the preparatory work for retaliation if necessary. But I think that trying to negotiate an arrangement which mitigates the tariffs is better. Of course, I believe in international law, and I accept it underpins everything we do bilaterally and multilaterally.
So what are we doing to hold countries to account?
Sorry?
What are we doing to hold countries to account?
Well, we are members of various courts and institutions, and that is one way of holding countries to account. But we also hold countries to account bilaterally in the discussions that we have at whatever level, whether that's leader to leader, whether that's foreign secretary to foreign secretary. We are critical of Russia as the aggressor in Ukraine because it's in breach of the UN Charter. That is a rules-based system. It is the basis of our criticism. It's the reason that almost all allies across the world, particularly in Europe, are putting in the amount of money they are because Russia is the aggressor and it's a rules-based system. And
Israel and the occupation of Palestine?
Well, again, I think the occupation is unlawful. We've said that. That's been long-standing government policy. In fact, in fairness, the last government as well. We are members of the international institutions.
Well, to our other lead story at this hour, hundreds of rescue workers in the Dominican Republic have been searching through rubble all night for survivors of a roof collapse at a nightclub in the capital, Santo Domingo. At least 113 people died. More than 150 others were injured in the incident, which happened just before 1 a.m. local time on Tuesday at the Jet Set Club. Hundreds of guests were inside the popular venue attending a concert by merengue singer Ruby Perez. Perez, as well as former Major League Baseball player Octavio Dotto and a provincial governor, are among those who are confirmed dead. It's not clear how many people exactly were inside the popular venue, but estimates range between 500 and 1,000 people. Emergency workers have demolished one of the walls of the club to better reach those still buried under the rubble. Relatives desperate for news of their missing loved ones have been holding vigils at the scene. Well, back to the tariffs imposed by U.S. President Donald Trump. Reactions coming from South Africa. The president of the African Refiners and Distributors Association, Mr. Mustafa Abdul Hamid, has described President Trump's tariff hikes as a wake-up call for Africa. He says it's time the continent turn inwards and build a stronger industrial and economic foundation. Abdul Hamid made the comments at ARDA Week 2025, currently taking place in Cape Town. Our South Africa correspondent Innocent Samosa reports.
The event brings together key professionals, stakeholders, and experts from across the energy industry to exchange ideas, explore innovations, and strengthen partnerships. Now, with Trump's tariffs continues to rage uncertainty across different sectors in the continent, the president of the African Refiners and Distributors Association, or ADA, Mustafa Abdul Hamid, says the time has come for the continent to look inward and build a stronger industrial and economic base.
So if even an advanced country like America is thinking of protecting its local industry and ramping up local production, it should only teach us a lesson that we should also look inwards and try to either we can reciprocate.
South Africa's CEO of Mining Federation also shares the same sentiment, urging African nations to reduce reliance on foreign markets.
What Mr. Trump has done for us is a gift, which we were not even aware of. What it has forced us to do, it has forced us to look amongst ourselves, to look internally within the continent. We've got agreements like the AFTA. We do not need Americans to be consumers of our products when we've got more than 1 billion people in the continent.
Lydia Neya from Gabon is calling for increased participation of women in the energy and mining sector, saying inclusivity is key to sustainable growth.
I mean, compared to upstream kind of association, I believe in the downstream association, there are more women and active women. We've seen great participation in the different working group over the weekend, and also in the different panel.
Meanwhile, some delegates see technology as a crucial enabler, one that can transform trade and boost competitiveness across the continent.
It's very important. Traditionally, it was very difficult to locate where your vessel would be, and you would have to rely on ship captains and those on board the vessel to give you updates. Now with our technology, we're using AIS. These are satellites which are based either on the vessels themselves or in the sky, and we're able to track the vessels and determine where they are, where they're located.
So what we're trying to do, we're trying to provide clarity for organizations, companies, traders, ship owners, and as such, and anyone who is in the value chain, to have better transparency on where their product is, where their product is going, and what's at sea, and actually mitigate some risks that there may be by us being able to highlight where the risks are and to help them make better decisions.
As Other Week 2025 continues here in Cape Town, delegates here are hopeful that collaboration and innovation will drive Africa's energy future forward. From Cape Town, South Africa, Innocent Samosa, Channels Television News.
Our correspondent Innocent Samosa speaking about the Other Week in South Africa. Let's turn to our Washington correspondent Maria Bird, who joins us now for more on reactions to China's announcement of 84% tariffs. Maria, I'm sure that the announcement has not gone down well with the Trump administration. The U.S. President Donald Trump saying that he would be very upset, if nations retaliate. He said, why should they even retaliate in the first place? So what's he said about China so far?
Well, I think, you've been very clear as to where his thoughts are, is that he would not be happy with tariff responses. I think we can expect to hear later today a direct communication either from his press secretary or from the White House as to how they plan to respond to these retaliatory tariffs. But I don't think the administration is surprised. I think the entire community here in the U.S., specifically those working in Washington, legislators on the Hill, are not surprised about these retaliatory tariffs. I think it was kind of clear that we would potentially see some backlash. I think the greatest concern, and what you're seeing a lot of economists focusing on, is what this means for what might be considered a mild recession. The markets are obviously in turmoil and responding to these tariffs that have obviously been implemented, and obviously the retaliatory tariffs. And so I think that is the real concern amongst Americans. And obviously that's what the economists are looking to see. How bad, if the recession could hit, what would it look like for America and obviously the entire globe?
So Americans are watching, as countries retaliate, but also as countries also negotiate with the U.S. president. I'm wondering how the market forces are reacting. However, 84% is rather high. This, I'm sure, is to teach Donald Trump a lesson somewhat.
Yes, I think that's really what this is about. This is about, two very powerful countries going back and forth. I mean, we've heard conversations for years around superpowers. And I think this is when you begin to see countries showing who is the real superpower as we look at trade agreements and trade relationships. And so as you see that, and you mentioned China, this could force further communication between the two countries. We can probably guarantee that maybe not in the next few weeks, but probably within the next few months, and even maybe up to a year from now, we will see communication, and whether or not it's delegations from the U.S. going to China or Chinese delegations coming to America, there will be a forcing of some sort of a relationship, trade agreements, and further collaboration between the two countries. So that's a large part, I think, of where we're going to be headed, because there's no way possible when we start to look at actually the immediate impact that either country and obviously any of the trade partners will be able to sustain these type of potential tariffs on both ends. And so especially if we begin to see it impacting the economies, which is projected that we could see up to 3/4 of a mild recession.
And this almost looks like deja vu, because the last time America had any spat with China, it was under President Trump, then he was president of the United States. He escalated the tensions between the two countries so high until I think he eventually had a meeting with Xi Jinping. And now it's the trade tariffs. How would you describe U.S.-China relations at the moment, given what is currently going on?
The U.S.-China relations have obviously been a bit challenged over the years, as you mentioned. This has gone before this administration, and it goes back to the previous Trump administration. And if we really look at even the Biden administration, there were some things that were brought together to bring further collaboration, but there never was a tight relationship between the U.S. and China. And a lot of that was due to some of the economic challenges that were being faced. And so I think what we're going to definitely see is, as you mentioned previously, a meeting between the two, but you will see a forced meeting as a result of these trade wars that are potentially ensuing between the U.S. and China, but obviously there are other countries as well. We know the EU is also being impacted by this. We know specifically tariffs around aluminum and the retaliation from the EU as it relates to what the president has put in place.
Well, they are the two largest economies in the world, so of course any spat between them would shake the markets. But President Trump has told Americans to keep calm. He says there are also countries calling to negotiate. Is that where he actually wanted countries to get to, the position where they're negotiating relationship with the U.S. based on trade, based on tariffs? Is this the point where he was trying to get these countries to in the first place?
Well, as we know, the president has stated before, he's not a politician by profession. And so the way in which he believes the strategy to move forward is very outcome driven and focused on kind of results focused. And so as you have mentioned, having put tariffs in place kind of forces the conversation. He doesn't seem to, has not been in previous administrations, one that has look to long negotiations, long delegations of conversations that could take an entire administration to see success. And so we're now just barely 4 months, not even 4 months, a little over 3.5 months into his administration, and we've already seen drastic changes. And so that is kind of his nature, that's his style, that's the way he governs and the way he leads. And so I think you're exactly correct to say that he is looking for countries to come to the table and actually coming to him to ask for further conversation and further negotiation. And so American people at this time only have hope to stand on. And their hope is that through this further negotiations, that it will allow for greater trade relationships, but obviously at the end of the day, impacting the U.S. economy in a positive light, and most importantly, being able to ensure people are able to have food on the table, shelter for their homes, and enough funds to be able to live each and every day.
Is there a sense of fear America could end up being a pariah state? I mean, the EU today voted to impose retaliatory tariffs against the United States, 20.9 billion euros worth of goods against the U.S. How is Trump reacting to this?
Well, I think he's not surprised, but he will be responding in those natures, especially when you talk about the goods that they are putting tariffs on. As you look at what we use aluminum for, we know that we are rebuilding kind of our auto industry, specifically also not only the electric vehicles, but your traditional vehicles, those that use gas, those that use, that we once saw very large manufacturing plants in the Midwest of the country, specifically Michigan. And so I think that is where you're going to begin to see the president putting some focus on. And so as the EU puts tariffs on those goods that are used, especially in the automobile industry, that's where you'll begin to see him speaking on this issue. But I don't think it's a surprise as it relates to this. I know that many Americans are used to having a very close relationship with the EU, and specifically European countries. And so this does put, I think, a bit of a concern maybe in some Americans and obviously some senators and congressional members. But the president has a clear eye, I think, as to what he's hoping will be the result of this. And as you mentioned previously, further negotiations, and probably most of this month will be spent negotiating. And we could see turnarounds. I don't think the president is at all afraid to potentially go back and reduce tariffs if negotiations are in alignment with, I think, what his ultimate thoughts and plans are.
So it is, he's just, I guess, just 3-4 months into his presidency, his second term as president. And he says Americans should be calm. He says not to be weak. He said so many things to Americans in the last few days. Are people as calm and calmly anticipating the changes to come, at least the benefits of them?
I don't know if people are calm. I'm not sure. I don't think they're surprised. I think that Americans are looking for relief. So I think they're standing on hope. And so when you think about, I think what they're really looking for, if this is going to be a period of potential pain, how is the economy going to respond to that? People still have bills to pay. People still have things to take care of. People still have to buy groceries. So how are the markets going to be addressed to address those issues specifically that people are going to be experiencing over the next few months while this is being worked through? So I think that would give people another sense of calm if there is some relief efforts as far as cost on everyday items and obviously on the obligations people have around their bills.
Maria, thanks again. More changes to come, I suppose. A week is still, we're just in the middle of the week, so possibly things might change by Friday. Thanks again for speaking with us. We're off on a short break now, away from Trump's tariffs to other events around the world. Still ahead, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says forces captured 2 Chinese nationals fighting on the side of Russia. Stay with us. Welcome back. And in China, 20 people have been killed in a fire at a nursing home in the northeast. The blaze in Chengde City, Hebei province, broke out on Tuesday night, local time, and was extinguished in about 2 hours. 19 people survived the fire and were taken to hospital for observation. Authorities are investigating the cause of the blaze, and a person in charge of the home has been detained. No other details are available. On social media, some call for a thorough investigation, while others express sympathy for the elderly victims. Nursing homes and elderly care facilities have doubled between 2019 and 2024, according to authorities, as China deals with a growing, aging population. Staying in Asia, Indonesia's President Prabowo Subianto has announced the country's readiness to take in as many as 1,000 Palestinians from Gaza. He made the announcement earlier today in a nationwide address. President Subianto says Indonesia is ready to evacuate those who are injured, those who are traumatized, orphans, anyone who the Palestinian government and related parties want to evacuate to Indonesia. The condition, however, he says, is that all parties must agree to this. Secondly, they are only there in Indonesia temporarily until they recover, and when they do recover, the conditions in Gaza have made it possible for them to return to their homes. He says the Republic of Indonesia is committed to supporting the safety of the Palestinian people, supporting Palestinian independence.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat malam, saudara-saudara.
And UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for an immediate end to the Israeli blockade in Gaza, saying the region has become a killing field and civilians are in an endless death loop.
No food, no fuel, no medicine, no commercial supplies. As aid has dried up, the floodgates of horror have reopened. Gaza is a killing field, and civilians are in an endless death loop. Certain truths are clear since the atrocious October 7 terror attacks by Hamas. Above all, we know ceasefires work. The ceasefire allowed for the release of hostages. The ceasefire ensured the distribution of life-saving aid. The ceasefire proved that the humanitarian community can deliver. For weeks, guns fell silent, obstacles were removed, looting ended, and we were able to deliver life-saving supplies to virtually every part of the Gaza Strip. That all ended with the shattering of the ceasefire. Israel has unequivocal obligations under international law, including international humanitarian law and international human rights law. Article 55, paragraph 1st of the Fourth Geneva Convention provides that, and I quote, "The occupying power has the duty of ensuring food and medical supplies of the population." End of quote. Article 56, paragraph 1 of the Fourth Geneva Convention provides that, and I quote, "The occupying power has the duty of ensuring and maintaining the medical and hospital establishments and services, public health and hygiene in the occupied territory. No humanitarian supplies can enter Gaza. Meanwhile, at the crossing points, food, medicine, and shelter supplies are piling up, and vital equipment is stuck."
Now, the Global Commission on Modern Slavery and Human Trafficking has unveiled comprehensive findings and recommendations from the Global Commission, which addresses the global challenges of modern slavery and human trafficking. Participants addressed the rise in modern slavery and human trafficking caused by the forced displacement of people due to conflict, organized crime, and climate change. And in corporate supply chains, they also offered insights into current trends, effective interventions, and policy frameworks. According to the report, there are still an estimated 50 million men and women and children trapped in slavery around the world. The stark reality of this level of individual suffering raises the questions: why is this still happening? What has gone wrong? And what does the global community need to do to ensure this injustice finally ends?
The factors. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the very foundation upon which the United Nations stands, adopted in 1948, clearly and unequivocally prohibits slavery and servitude. And yet, as we gather here today, an estimated 50 million men, women, and children are trapped in slavery across the globe. My message to you today is that we must act, and we must act now. If we fail to do so, millions more people will be trapped in exploitation. Millions more lives will be at risk. The factors that make people vulnerable to modern slavery and human trafficking are growing, fueled by the escalating global challenges of climate change, forced displacement, and conflict. Consider, for example, communities devastated by climate-induced floods, droughts, their livelihoods destroyed, forcing them through economic necessity into the cruel hands of exploiters. Think of the millions displaced by armed conflict, so often women and children, who face unimaginable poverty, making them targets for sex traffickers or those who profit from forced labor, or those who recruit child soldiers.
To pull at the roots of modern slavery and human trafficking, we must tackle the very situations that conspire to keep people in vulnerability. For instance, poverty, climate change, conflict and instability, irregular migration, inequality including on the basis of gender, race, and other factors, and lack of access to education, health care, markets, and social protections designed to lift all people up, not leave some behind. Efficiency hinges on each member state's ability to implement the frameworks at hand. This is why partnerships with civil society, the private sector, and others are critical to our success. Together, we must allocate the resources. We must take a stronger stand against modern slavery and human trafficking.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says forces have captured 2 Chinese nationals who were fighting for the Russian army in eastern Ukraine's Donetsk region. He said on Tuesday, intelligence suggested the number of Chinese soldiers in Russia's army was much higher than 2. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andrei Sybiha says Chinese troops fighting on Ukrainian territory puts into question China's declared stance for peace and added that their envoy in Kyiv was summoned for an explanation. It's the first official allegation from Ukraine that China is supplying Russia with manpower. Russia has declined to comment on Zelensky's revelation. However, China's foreign ministry says it's verifying the relevant situation with the Ukrainian side, but it had consistently urged Chinese nationals to steer clear of any armed conflicts. The United States has criticized China following Ukraine's announcement that it caught the 2 Chinese nationals fighting alongside Russian forces. State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce, at a press conference on Tuesday, said President Trump maintains the continued cooperation between Russia and China will further contribute to global instability.
It's disturbing with North Korea participating. It's disturbing with the Chinese soldiers having been captured. We're aware of those reports that Ukraine captured 2 Chinese citizens fighting on behalf of Russia in Ukraine. China is a major enabler of Russia in the war in Ukraine. China provides nearly 80% of the dual-use items Russia needs to sustain the war. 80% comes from China. As President Trump has said, continued cooperation between these 2 nuclear powers will only further contribute to global instability and make the United States and other countries less safe, less secure, and less prosperous. I think that's an understatement. And of course, you mentioned the attack on Kryvyi Rih, which is the hometown of President Zelensky. It was a Russian Federation ballistic missile strike in a residential neighborhood of that town. It is further underscores President Trump's urgent call for peace. And he's affected by this. It's long time to stop the death and the destruction and end this war. Just as we know, President Trump has been committed to finding and demanding the return of the missing or stolen Ukrainian children from Russia. So this is the top of the mind for President Trump and for Secretary Rubio.
First of all, an American teenager was shot and killed and 2 others were shot in the West Bank. Has the U.S. called on the Israeli government to investigate their killings?
Australian authorities say a faulty radio antenna contributed to a deadly mid-air helicopter collision at an Australian theme park and resort. 4 people died, including 2 British tourists, and several more were injured seriously when the 2 aircraft hit each other in January of 2023. An investigation by Australia's Transport and Safety Bureau found one of the pilots did not hear a vital radio call shortly before the accident, and that a series of changes by SeaWorld meant risk controls were over time eroded. The accident rocked the Gold Coast, one of the nation's biggest tourist hotspots. Segueing into Africa, now Niger's military government has officially made Hausa the country's new national language, dumping the French language, moving away from its colonial past. The change was announced in a new charter published in a special edition of the government's official journal. According to the document, the national language is Hausa, while English and French are the working languages. Hausa is the most commonly spoken language across the country, especially in the regions of Zinda, Maradi, and Tahua regions. Most of the country's population of about 26 million people understand and speak Hausa. In comparison, only around 3 million people, just 13%, can speak French. The new charter also officially lists 9 other local languages, including Zama-Songhai, Fula, Kanuri, Goromanche, and Arabic as the spoken languages of Niger. 3 Americans who unsuccessfully attempted a coup attempt against the Democratic Republic of Congo's government are now back in U.S. custody. The Americans will now be serving their sentences in the U.S. after a death penalty from a military tribunal in September 2024 was commuted to life sentence. The three of them are 21-year-old Marcel Malanga, son of opposition figure Christian Malanga, who led the failed coup and was killed after targeting presidential palace in Kinshasa. Also repatriated is 21-year-old Tyler Thompson Jr., a friend of Marcel's who flew to Africa from Utah for what his family believed was a free vacation. 36-year-old Benjamin Ruben Zalman Pollen is the third person. He is reported to have known Christian Malanga through a gold mining company. The repatriation comes as the U.S. and the DR Congo explore a deal to explore the Central African country's huge mineral wealth. Last week, U.S. President Donald Trump's senior advisor for Africa visited the DR Congo and confirmed the two countries are in talks about minerals and says it could involve a multi-billion-dollar investment. Still ahead on The World Today. Welcome back to The World Today. As obesity rates continue to rise around the world, Finland has taken a quiet but innovative approach to tackling the challenge. At the heart of this effort is a digital health coaching program run out of Helsinki University Hospital, and it's blending science and technology and human support to help people make lasting lifestyle changes.
Finland, a country of nearly 6 million people, is grappling with a growing health challenge: obesity. According to the Healthy Finland survey by the Finnish Institute for Health and Welfare, approximately 1.2 million adults, 27% of men and 30% of women have a body mass index above the obesity threshold of 30. The numbers are most alarming among adults between the ages of 40 to 64, where 1 in 3 is living with obesity. Among young adults between the ages of 20 to 39, it's 1 in 5. But at the Helsinki University Hospital, the response to this complex health challenge is a digital-first approach that's also human. Launched almost a decade ago, Finland's healthy weight coaching program blends medical science with technology to support long-term lifestyle changes. Patients begin with a traditional in-person consultation, but the bulk of the care happens online. Secure chats with nurse coaches, digital food diaries, personalized feedback, and psychological support.
What I think is valuable, what makes influence, is not digital, but it's digitalizing the human being. What we try to do there is to digitalize the expensive part, which is the person, the healthcare professional. That's the costly part. But that's also the most influential part. So a human needs another human, because there will be a difficult time. These patients, imagine you saw their risk profile and their disease profile. They are also people who have a lot of stress and they need a lot of help.
While digital tools provide an opportunity to extend care beyond the clinic, it is also important to adapt coaching to the user's lifestyle and progress.
The thing is, you do want to meet people where they are. You want to help them achieve goals that are relevant to them. And Kirsi and her team are really good about talking about self-efficacy. How do you help build up self-efficacy in your coaching? There are 3 specific things that we're currently developing. There's an AI dietitian that's based on language models, but is very specific in what it offers. Meal image detection is another thing. We have neural networks that help analyze the food, and it's not about calories. The point about the image recognition that we're developing is about understanding general health patterns and eating patterns, because it's not about analyzing one particular meal, which is where most people's focus goes. It's more about helping the professional understand what are the eating habits of this individual. And then the third factor is coaching functionalities. So by putting all these together, the goal of the work we're doing is that by the end of the year, the efficacy of the coaches should improve by 50%.
But in health tech, innovation must go hand in hand with trust. especially when it involves sensitive health data.
The EU has a challenge right now in terms of utilizing these new tools and at the same time not making sure that we don't over-regulate. That's a really key challenge. Security is really important, and GDPR regulations, as you're aware, was Europe's step into that. There is a new AI law that's in effect, and that actually is part of how we're looking at these new tools. So there are risk assessments that we do together with the coaches as well as with the IT team, and there are ways of using those tools in the in the healthcare setting. And so following those rules and regulations is the way to do it.
Finland's program isn't claiming to have all the answers, and those behind it are quick to acknowledge the complexity of obesity. But what they are offering is a glimpse of what care can look like when it is digitally smart and deeply human. From Helsinki in Finland, Olayemi Oshidende for Channels Television News.
Back here in Africa, Rwanda is marking the 31st annual commemoration of the 1994 genocide. Since the beginning of the week, the country has hosted several ceremonies around the world. In Kigali, President Paul Kagame and First Lady Jeanette Kagame, alongside the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, accredited to the country's capital, and representatives of survivors, laid wreaths at the Kigali Genocide Memorial, the resting place of over 250,000 victims. President Kagame and the First Lady lit the flame of remembrance at the memorial, a symbol of hope and resilience to light for 100 days the span of the genocide. Speaking at the event, the president assured that genocide will never happen again in Rwanda.
When people are saying in the testimony that, the hope they have and that what happened here 30-something years ago will never happen again. It won't be because of those who were responsible for that dark past. Will not try again, or are not even trying now again. It will not happen again just because there will be people who will stand up and fight. The whole thing about genocide, this ideology that has killed millions of people, has been turned into a problem of minerals. It's okay. Let's imagine it's a problem of minerals now. Was it a problem of minerals in 1994? Which minerals were we fighting for here?
Nigeria, the Rwandan High Commission called on the international community to live up to its commitment to combat genocide ideology, hold fugitives accountable, and prevent future atrocities. Our correspondent Benny Ark reports.
It's the 31st commemoration of the 1994 Rwanda genocide, as the country honors the memory of the over 1 million lives lost in one of the deadliest genocides the world has ever recorded. Attended by government officials, the Rwanda High Commission, diplomats, and civil society members, the event is guided by the theme, Remember, Unite, Renew.
Kindly remain standing.
A minute silence was observed by all present in honor of the lives lost, then followed by a candlelight procession. It suddenly became a somber mood as guests watched a video presentation of the genocide against the Tutsis. The Rwandan High Commissioner reflects on the country's painful history and the progress made towards healing and reconciliation.
This journey has not been easy. Rwanda has made significant strides in overcoming the divisions of the past. However, we remain aware that challenges still persist and our work is far from to be complete. This is not just Rwanda's fight. It demands the urgent and concerted attention of the entire international community.
The United Nations also recognizes the journey of the Rwandan people towards healing and reconciliation as the dangers of hate speech and rising intolerance is highlighted.
I urge all states to deliver on commitments made in the Global Digital Compact to tackle online falsehoods and hate, to comply with their obligations under international humanitarian and human rights law, and to become parties to the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide without delay. On this day of remembrance, let's commit to be vigilant and to work together to build a world of justice and dignity for all.
This commemoration is a story from despair to hope and serves as a call to action for nations, policymakers, scholars, journalists, civil society, and young people to advance the values of truth, peace, and justice, ensuring that the future generations live free from the shadows of hate. Benny Ark, Channels Television News.
The International Organization for Migration says all peace initiatives have failed in Sudan, largely because of the intransigence of the military and its leader, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. The IOM is accusing the army of rejecting regional mediation efforts despite repeated attempts by the African Union and the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, to halt the war, and also clinging to a military solution that has dashed hopes for a ceasefire and deepened the humanitarian catastrophe. According to the IOM, recent political developments have also added a new and alarming dimension to the crisis when the army's deputy commander, Yasser al-Attah, issued explicit threats against several African nations, declaring airports in N'Djamena and Amjaras in Chad as legitimate military targets. On April 15, Sudan's civil war will enter its third year, marking a grim milestone in a conflict that has defied every regional and international effort to bring peace. The United Nations says it spiraled into the world's worst humanitarian crisis. As fortunes of the warring factions shift in the devastating war in Sudan, the government is currently having the upper hand, having taken the country's capital, Khartoum, and routed the rapid support forces from central Sudan. The RSF fighters are now massing in the southwest of the country. One of the main groups supporting the Sudanese military government is the Sudanese Youth for Change and Justice Movement. It's led by Lieutenant General Talit Abkar, whose fighters are playing a deciding role in the fight against the RSF in places like central and northern Sudan. General Khalid has recently been touring the eastern states of Sudan, such as Gadaref, Port Sudan, Sennar, and Kassala. He is currently in White Nile State in the south-central region. He wields a strong influence on the Sudanese youth and is playing an important role in turning the tide in the civil war. The military government led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan is on the verge of appointing new people to replace those who joined the RSF in 2023. General Khalid is being tipped as ready to occupy a key position in the new administration. Exciting news in the UK. The government has promised the first universal theme park in Europe will be built there. The attraction is planned for the site of a former brickworks near Bedford and could create an estimated 28,000 jobs before opening in 2031. Universal estimates the 476-acre complex could attract 8.4 million visitors in the first year. According to Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, the multi-billion-pound investment by the company would see Bedford home to one of the biggest entertainment parks in Europe, firmly putting the country or the county on the global stage. He's joked that his children are not particularly interested in the news, but this one really caught their attention. And as we end, Dallas-based company Colossal Biosciences has successfully brought the extinct dire wolf species back to life after more than 12,500 years. The two white dire wolf pups are named Romulus and Remus, running and playing around the 8 square kilometer specially created compound for them. We're looking at footage provided by the Colossal Biosciences documents, which documents the wolves' early months of growth from newborn pups to 5 months old, showcasing their development and integration. The pups were born in October 1st of last year. They represent a huge advance in genetics, achieved by reconstructing the dire wolf genome using ancient DNA extracted from fossils dating back 11,500 and 72,000 years. The company utilized CRISPR, genetic editing technology, to fill in the gaps in the genome and create viable offspring. Colossal Biosciences, posting on its X account, hailed the unprecedented success as a leap forward for science, conservation, and humanity. We are definitely looking at a world wonder. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.